Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Good morning, good morning, good morning. Happy Tuesday, and welcome to another episode of Vuka Nazo here on the Big Daddy Liberty Show. My name is Usihle Ngobese. Remember, if you love the show, love the format, hit that like button, and most importantly, hit the share button. Have more people watch this morning news analysis show. Welcome to it. If you want to find us, of course, and contact us, all of our social media information is in the descriptor of the video, and you can visit us at www.bigdaddyliberty.com. With that being said, let's get straight into the news. Okay, we begin here on this fine morning. Unfortunately, Tembisa on the East Rand of Johannesburg not having a fine morning at all, where the situation there is insanely tense, and indeed scenes of chaos and public violence playing out there as protesters, indeed rioters now, and vandals are clashing with not only police but also the local metro police. As I said, chaotic scenes. Just have a look at this. Now, what makes this entire thing, really the situation insane, is that you have a situation here where these residents may very well have a legitimate grievance. That's not, I'm not prosecuting that issue. That's not the issue here. But this grievance, this issue, and this is where it gets scary, is one which will not be relegated to just Tembisa. The price of things, the cost of living has been screaming in an upward direction, and poor folk and those who maybe even consider themselves okay and are now finding themselves sinking are going to be the very sort of people who become ever increasingly angry, ever increasingly prone, and even enticed into entering these sort of protests which devolve into, sadly, riots and destruction of property. Now, I say it's sad for two reasons. On the one hand, in this protest, 3 people at the time of making this recording had lost their lives in this. And of course, as I said, the other thing that makes it incredibly sad is the very public infrastructure that these communities need, often when these protests become riotous and destructive, are destroyed, rendering that very same community at a disadvantage. Now, let me come back. As I said, 3 people at the time of recording this video had already been killed. And unfortunately, it's what happens when unaccountable, unknown at times, community leaders lead people who are rightly angry and do so in an unaccountable way. Here's what this piece had to say about those 3 individuals who lost their lives really senselessly. The first victim was allegedly shot by the Ekurhuleni Metro Police Department while he was busy buying a cigarette at one of the shops in Makulong. And of course, another one was said to be visiting a friend next to his house when he was caught in the crossfire after police opened fire. The third victim, it's unclear at this moment what happened to them, but they are said to have died in Mtambega section. You have a situation here where 3 people are dead, and it begs the question, why? Why did it even have to get to this point? And perhaps all parties involved here, especially the political leadership in this area, the local councillors, should be some of the loudest voices to not only quell the tensions, but also to address these issues. But as a final point, there's a bigger point to be made here. As South Africans, we need to begin to ask the questions, is this kind of behavior, the destructive, almost self-sabotaging behavior of just destroying things when we're unhappy, is that kind of behavior the kind of behavior we should be tolerating? Is this culture of protest or really riots something we should be continuing with, or is it something we need to nip in the bud as we say from here on, we build this country, we don't destroy it? All right, we end tonight's show here with this story, of course. You'll remember that state of disaster that the politicians passed when they were trying to fight the spicy cough. Well, unfortunately, remnants of that asinine state of disaster and indeed the lockdown that came with it still remain for far too many South Africans. Now, with the politicians having ended that state of disaster, which lasted from the 15th of March 2020, of course, to the 4th of April 2022, just over 2 years of that absolute nonsense, you have a situation where, according to the Justice Minister, the Justice and Correctional Services Minister, Ronald Lamola, who was responding to a parliamentary question, he now says, hey man, actually, even though the state of disaster is over, there are still 265 South Africans who are facing court action related to those regulations, asinine as they were, and of course for contravening their lockdown. And this is where it gets even more frightening, and it gives you an impression and a sense of just how elaborate and all-encompassing and simply insidious the lockdown was. Nearly 10,000 South Africans, 10,000 people in this country nearly found themselves appearing for charges related to the state of disaster regulations. And of course, those people found themselves wasting time going to court, having to fight off these nonsense regulations, and at times even being dragged before the courts and subjected to that simply because they did something which is ordinarily legal and rational behavior. Now, you have a situation where it gets even worse. It gets even worse. You'll remember, if you're a fan of the show, that I've always been saying that these regulations, some of them are just simply a grift, a simple way for politicians and the political elites to line their pockets. The hashtag COVID grift, if you remember. And this is where it gets rather grifty. I'm going to read this little passage here where the minister says, persons charged with offences related to contraventions in terms of the state of disaster regulations may have actually paid a, quote, admission of guilt fine, and those dockets would not have been sent to the MPA except if the admission of guilt fine may have been set aside in terms of the applicable legislation. Now, I mention this admission of guilt thing because for a lot of people, that's what it effectively boiled down to. To get out of trouble, you had to line the pockets of the state. It was a pure grift. And it's a shame that there are still South Africans today who are fighting this. And I would really hope they lawyer up, and maybe even some sort of class action perhaps could be brought against the politicians. How about they do the paying for a change? All right, that's it from me on this, a Tuesday edition of Vuka Nazo. Remember, if you like the show, whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram, make sure you hit that like button, and please do me a solid, share this video. That's the most important thing you can do to help me grow this channel. If you want to find me on any of my social media, all of that information is in the descriptor of the video. And of course, hey, visit me on my website. That's www.bigdaddyliberty.com. There you can also find out how you can support the show financially and help us get the content out. That being said, thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow on Vuka Nazo.